Hey, so I wanted to talk a little bit about walk cycles. Everybody does them, and a lot of us, when we're starting, our first kind of port of call really is to look at the Richard Williams stuff. And we often come across an image like this in the book, which shows the kind of main poses of a walk cycle. We've got the contact pose, the down pose, passing up, and then another contact. And when we're working in CG, usually the ones we tend to put in first are the contacts because probably in 2D as well, because they allow you to kind of establish the length of the stride and the overall positioning of where the character is in the scene. So they're very kind of useful tent posts if you like to figure out where we are. But there's something you often run into, and I've run into this a lot when I've been animating walks and stuff. So I thought I'd just show a couple of things that can often trip you up, no pun intended. Um, so what I'm doing here is I've got basically just a rough. I'm kind of ignoring the hips and all the stuff that goes on above the body, but I'm really just focusing on the feet and the legs for the moment. I've put in the basic poses that we had in that reference, just the contact, and I've got the opposite contact, the mirrored one, and then in frame 25 here I've got the first pose again, it's identical. And I've also then put in the passing poses, so halfway between those I've got frame 7 here, and frame 19, the mirrored version of that. And those poses, they're not anything amazing. I'm just block these out really quickly, but they're basically what we have in the reference there, but adjusted a little bit to suit this slightly more naturalistic character compared to the stick figure. But you notice what happens when I press play here. It looks really weightless. Um, because I haven't put in those other poses, and because I haven't considered something very important about one of them. Um, you'll notice here the computer is going to just give us in-betweens that are just linearly or whatever way you have your keyframe set, blending between those poses that you set up. So when you go from the contact pose to the passing pose without another pose in there, you're going to get this kind of thing where the foot just kind of comes off the ground. And if you're using that, I like to call it the commotion system in cinema for animating walk cycles as well. It kind of promises to be a one-button solution for walk cycles. It'll give you walks like this as well, but out of the box unless you really tweak it. And they won't look natural at all. For the same reason, and I've got a little bit of video reference here to show it. I stuck on my gym shoes and just kind of posed a bit here in front of a bright background so you could kind of see exactly what's going on. Um, I'm what I'm doing really here at the moment at the start here is I'm standing in that contact pose as best as I can. I'm trying to approximate that pose. This one here, I'm trying to approximate that, or the mirrored version of it. This kind of one. And you'll notice if I press play here, I'm kind of wobbling. And I like to think I've got reasonably good balance. I used to ride a skateboard as a kid and that kind of thing, and didn't injure myself too often. Um, so I think I've got reasonable balance, but I find this pose tricky to maintain. And I bet if you stand up, and try this, you'll find it tricky as well because it's an intermediate pose. It's not an actual pose that we can really hold or we generally would hold a lot of the time. It's just kind of an intermediate phase between the you could say almost between the passing poses and the next passing pose. The next thing, this is the kind of thing I suggest actually. If you stand up and actually try and achieve this pose, and try and hold it so your ball of your foot or the heel of your foot is on the floor here. The ball is kind of off the floor, and you're on the ball of your foot here on the back foot, and then try something. Try to do basically what this guy is doing, lifting his feet up like that. And I'm pretty sure, you watch me trying it here, it's pretty much impossible. You can't. You can't lift your foot off. That's really my whole point of this is you can't lift that back foot off until you've transitioned the weight onto this front leg. And you'll see after a couple of attempts here, I give up and I roll I'm kind of exaggerating the poses here, but I'm rolling onto my weight onto my forward foot. And now you'll see a lot of compression going on with my toe here because there's still weight on that foot until the very last minute. Until my weight, if you can imagine my hips I've translated forward above this leg now. whereas previously they were kind of halfway between the two legs. It's only when the hips get to that point that I can actually, now I can lift that leg up without any issues, because now my weight, my center of balance is right over this leg, and now I can do what I want with that foot. I can bring it into the forward pose, the contact, or the peak pose, some people call it, and then into the next contact. So I suggest it might seem silly, but stand up and actually try this, and it'll kind of really bring it home to you that there's no way really you can do this. You can do it for a second maybe if you've got good balance, but your weight is completely unbalanced, so the foot has to come back down, or you have to fall backwards. One or the other thing is going to happen. So that's basically what's happening here. That's why we're not seeing any weight. So I'm just going to quickly block in that down pose, and it is in. I'm not picking on Richard Williams by any means here. He knows what he's talking about. That down pose is in there, but it's not, for me anyway, it's not terribly clear from this image that there's still weight on this foot, which I think is an important thing to consider. Obviously he's dealing with a stick figure here and more cartoony stuff, whereas in CG we're often dealing with a little slightly more realistic characters, or at least more naturalistic characters. So we need to have a little bit more weight there. So I'm going to just block in really quickly. I'm going to block in just a kind of a down pose. So I'm going to go to frame 4 here. It's kind of halfway between these two poses. And the first thing I'm going to do, actually, just to make it simple, I'm actually going to copy, for the back foot anyway, I'm going to copy this pose to here. So I've just completely locked that in. And then the front foot, I'm going to leave it translate through like that, but I'm going to zero out the attributes so that it's flat on the floor. So now I've got that kind of thing. And because this is a treadmill walk, because I'm not actually moving the character through space, I got to think about how much this leg moves back. If I zoom in a little bit, what I sometimes do is I use a screen marker, or use my ghost tool or whatever to kind of make a mark. If I use a small marker here and go to like something bright color, if I just to illustrate, if I look at this distance here, and then if I go to this frame and draw another line, I basically want to make sure that this foot moves back the same distance. It's a little bit tricky because the heel is off the ground here, so what I'm going to do is going to use this controller here, so roughly about there. I'm just eyeballing that now. You could do that in the graph editor and do it, accurately, but I'm just going to eyeball it for the moment. So I'm just going to pull this back until it gets to about there, and now you'll see it might not be perfect, but it's kind of close. The other thing I'll probably do is increase the foot roll a little bit, so we see this foot kind of starting to transition off. So now we've got this leg is starting to take the weight, so this leg can now release the weight, but it can't release it before that. This foot might come down a little bit faster than 3 frames. It's quite slow for this foot to actually plant, but I say I'm not going to get into too much details of that. I'm just going to really focus on this back leg. But just to show you that, if I mirror that pose over here, I'm going to copy it and then mirror it. Already that looks quite a bit better. The other thing we often find is that this front foot will kind of favor the front pose a lot. So I'm just very quickly doing that. I'd spend a little more time on this, but again, I'm just going to mirror that pose. So that's, I say, very rough, but you get the idea. Straight away it looks like it's got a little bit more weight. The other pose I think is quite important as well is to think about is actually this pose. Just the frame where this foot comes off, this back foot lifts up, because it's still sort of weightless. So for that kind of pose, what I often do is I ghost the frame so I can kind of have a reference, and then I take this foot. And there's loads of different ways to do this, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to zero out the attributes and just bring it up like this. And then, so I'm keeping the foot coming back, and I might animate this guy. I might just animate it like that, just so there's still a little bit of a sense of the toe pushing off the ground there. And I might actually, I'm not going to mirror that actually, because I have to mirror both those controls. And then as this foot swings through, I might zero out the rotation on that again. So you'll see that one has a bit more weight to it than the opposite one, which just comes straight out of that. See, the spacing there is there's a bit of a pop, whereas this one we still get a bit more of a transition. and then there's a bit more of a sense of weight. Ah, sure, while I'm here, why not? I might as well just block this in quickly. So again, I'm going to zero that out there. I'm going to zero it out there. And then this pose, I'm going to zero out the attributes, bring it up a bit. I could mirror these poses, but why not do it by eye? And maybe bring the foot back a little bit and rotate it down. Something like that, make my ghost a little bit thinner so I can see it. This foot only has one rotation point, so we just got this block here. It's not going to be quite as organic looking as my own toe. We'll see when that really scrunches up there. You'd need more deformers in the foot to actually get that exact shape. But I'm trying to approximate that kind of thing. So now let's look at it. I'll hide the ghosts. I'll hide the controllers. I'll hide these guys. So you can see it's pretty rough. Like the front end of this pose, I would definitely finesse a bit more. Whoops, go to the side view again. This part of it, I would probably do something like that, and then have it come down like that. Let's try something like that. Again, I'll mirror that. That's a little bit cleaner. Oops, I didn't mirror it properly. Sorry. That one. That's a bit better. So I'm not worrying about the upper body, the hips, any of that kind of stuff. That's all things you have to think about as well. But I think I've made my point. Hopefully, I've demonstrated a little bit more weight. I've animated, I don't know how many walk cycles. I've never animated one I'm really happy with. It's kind of an endless quest for me. But I'm always trying to figure out, why don't they work? And often, really, the solution is, to start with this kind of stuff, but to actually go to live action, to go to reference, film yourself. Everybody's got a means of filming themselves these days, whether it's a phone or a flip cam or a GoPro or whatever you have handy. It doesn't have to be high res or any way detail or even the right frame rate. It's just as long as you can see what's going on, really. That's really what you need to study and kind of figure out what's happening. So I hope people find that helpful. Cheers.